800-570-6630. 800-570-6630. That's 800-570-6630. Offers require credit qualification, 24-month commitment, early termination fee, and e-auto pay. Restrictions apply. Call for details.
There's a new food show sheriff in town, Podna. Trey's Chow Podcast Live will feature celebrity chefs and pitmasters with celebrity mixologists with creative cocktail menus from distilleries statewide. We'll have farmers, ranchers, wildlife experts, fishermen, and more, all for the culinary world and the foodies. Live from the Spoonie Studios on the iHeartRadio platform, Trey's Chow Podcast Live. Hey everybody, we are back again for another show of Trey's Chow Down Live here on Friday. We're here with John Tesar from Dallas today. John, how you doing?
How are you, Trey? Good to have you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you came in today. It's awesome.
No, I love talking, so here we are.
Here we are. Okay. We're going to talk with John today about his career. We got a lot of people in the studio today. We got, there's a lot of people out there, isn't there?
Oh, God, they're cheering, ringing bells. Mojo's on fire this morning.
That's what it is. That station's crazy. All right, let's get right into John. We're going to talk to John a bit about life and about kind of where he's come from and where he's going and what he's doing now. So let's just get right down to it, John. Mm-hmm. So you're from the East Coast, correct?
I'm a New Yorker, born and raised.
Okay.
My parents lived in New York and also had a house on the east end of Long Island.
That's awesome.
They call it.
That's awesome. So how old were you when you decided? Let me back up. When you started cooking, did you want to be a chef, or something you just kind of fell into you wanted to do?
I was a surfer and a skateboarder.
That's right. You did tell me that.
And I figured a way to stay at the beach all day long. And at 17, my dad gave me this little wooden boat that he had made.
Right.
And a 62 Ford Falcon that he bought from a woman in Hampton Bays that was up on blocks.
Right.
And he said, "You're on your own, son." So, I went to the beach during the day, and I got in with this bunch of guys, and this gentleman named Billy Thorne owned a place called Magic's Pub. And you have to remember, this is the 70s.
Right.
So this is a red and white checkered tablecloth restaurant. There's no American cuisine yet. There's no Wolfgang Puck or Larry Forgione or Dean Farring, any of these people, right? So this is Americana, like kind of doing like pseudo versions of European food.
Right.
But this was a pub. We just served steaks and hamburgers and had a deep fryer. I washed dishes. But there were girls and beer in the back room and rock and roll. So, it was the cool kids. We all had long hair and ponytails. We were hippie surfers back then. So, and then I just fell in love with the glamour of cooking. This place Magic's was in the Hamptons, and it had an amazing clientele. A lot of writers would come in the afternoon, like George Plimpton, Jimmy Breslin, a lot of artists. So
oh, wow.
I got to make Bloody Mary mix and tuna fish sandwiches and talk to George Plimpton and Jimmy Breslin about life. It was kind of an awesome thing at 16 years old.
That's such a different time back in those times. So, oh my gosh, have times changed, boy?
Oh, they have, especially in our business too.
Yeah.
Like you don't get that. It's really rare that you get that kind of intimacy with those type of people, or and that's really what ingratiated me about the restaurant business. I was into the social nature of it. I later became a chef, but I really enjoy making people happy or talking to people and learning about them. And you learn about human nature and life by your customers.
I met you, I realized passion. It's your passion. That's what you do.
It's a weird thing. I don't want to get too deep into psychology, but I'm adopted, so I have this love of life. You struggle sometimes with why your parents may have given you away or something. Yeah. But then when you come full circle on that, you just wow, I'm alive and I have this great life. And, I've been very lucky to have a life that I've made for myself. So that helps a lot.
Yeah. I didn't know you were adopted. That's
yeah. It's just, it's part of life, I'd never met my original parents, but my real name was Thomas Kenyon at one time.
Thomas Kenyon?
I'm Irish. I just did my DNA. We did a food festival.
You did that?
In Florida. and the gift bag they gave us, there was a DNA test. So I sent it out there. And for years, I didn't know. But when my adoptive parents, my mother passed away, right. She left me a whole bunch of papers. And I looked through my adoption papers, and my name was Thomas Kenyon. So I didn't know that I was Irish. But then when I did the DNA thing, the first thing that came up was Ireland, Scotland, England. It was See, I'm Irish.
I haven't done that yet. I want to do it, but
you got to do it. You got to do it because. And it goes all the way back to Africa. Some of it's absurd because it goes back to the beginning of mankind. But that's how DNA works. It's we're all coming from one place.
It's scary now. First of all, you can't get away with anything. Nobody can. So.
Oh yeah, between cameras and and YouTube and Instagram, and you just behave yourself.
No, you have to.
Just behave yourself.
If you don't, every once in a while somebody slap you in the back of the head.
You'd be surprised. I just see people taking pictures of people doing silly things all day long.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just like,
it's going to come back to get you.
Exactly.
So when you left, what'd you call it, the Magic Pub?
It was Magic's Pub.
Magic's Pub.
Yeah, I lived in a house that summer. I moved out of my parents' house, and I lived with 4 girls.
Okay.
And they were friends of mine.
Right.
And they worked in a French restaurant as servers.
Okay.
And they were like, you got to come over. These guys, Pierre and Alain, they had just come from the south of France. Right. Francine Farkas, whose husband owned Alexander's department store in New York City,
right.
was the owner of the restaurant. And she brought these 2 French chefs from the south of France back to the Hamptons with her, Pierre and Alain. Alain was a pastry chef. Pierre was a chef and a personality, front of the house. They really both were. They went to hotel school in France.
Oh, wow.
And it was like my first introduction. So I'm 17 years old, a surfer boy living in the Hamptons. And I went from the local pub, talking to all of these amazing people. And now I'm deep into, aspic, gelée. I'm making
right.
croutons to order.
Right.
We're making Caesar salad tableside. I'm learning how to make bordelaise sauce. Some of the things that I still keep in my repertoire today, I learned in that restaurant. And then I went to Paris. And I went to cooking school.
Right.
So that really was the foundation of my career. So it was random that I started as a surfer, washed dishes, grilled hamburgers, then went to a French restaurant, went to Paris, and now I'm making steak and hamburgers again. So I've come full circle. I've come full circle in my life.
Well, so back then wasn't there was a lot of French cuisine back then.
There was in New York City, that was
right.
the era. It was the beginning of the era of the grand French
right.
restaurant, the
right.
Lutèces, the La Grand Oui. Stuart father was an IBM attorney, and they lived in Paris. And at one time, I guess they lived there for 8 years. So I was dating her, and her mother told me about this cooking school, La Varenne, which was started by Simone Beck and Anne Willing and Julia Childs.
Oh, Julia Childs.
Their husbands were all in the OCC, or I guess which was the British version of the CIA,
right.
during World War II. And they started this cooking school for diplomats' wives in Paris. Wow. And it was, it spun off to be Cordon Bleu, but La Varenne, they went to Cordon Bleu, and they started La Varenne. So I went to the school. There were 6, 7 people in a class. Every morning
That's it.
We would work with 2 French chefs. There was Chef Chambrette and Chef Claude, and they would give us out menus, and each of us would cook a dish, and then we'd sit down and eat lunch and drink wine. Occasionally, Julia Childs would drop in and say hello, or whoever it was
right.
would pop in and have lunch.
Yeah.
And we'd learn a lot from them and talk to them. And then in the afternoon, we'd have demonstrastrations with 3-star Michelin chefs.
Yeah,
where they would be
awesome.
shaving truffles on things.
Yeah.
And stuff I had never seen before. So I'm like a fool who stepped into a lot of luck in life.
Yeah, you know what though? That is a great backstory. I mean, you talk about a great basis to start your career on. That's phenomenal. But when you started too, food wasn't rock star. Now food's a rock star. Chefs are celebrities that make it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was so weird that I was so lucky to fall into the French genre. Because that was kind of like, I used the word classy back then. Right. You know what I mean? If you look back to the 70s, it was that kind of, people dressed and, they had
right.
Kiana shirts and bell-bottom pants.
I was going to say bell-bottoms.
They were going to Studio 54 and doing the hustle. You have to remember how long ago this was, So that was kind of like the shine. And then I realized, guys like Alfred Portali were coming back from working with Jacques Maximin in Monte Carlo and Paris and coming to New York and getting jobs and making like lawyer doctor money.
Right.
So I looked at it from a business angle going like, well, if I go to France, that's like going to graduate school. And in New York at that time, everyone wasn't French trained or, right. I mean, the world has changed in our business. So, I mean, where we are right now is kind of a crazy place.
Yeah,
so I want to talk about that later if you
we'll
don't mind.
To.
But,
it's kind of unbelievable, but we'll talk
going
about
to France really changed my life because it gave me the foundation, introduced me to Europe, and Italy. And they were deep already into Asian food and all of the worldly influences that took a lot longer to hit the American food scene.
It still happens. I think that still happens today a lot. I think.
Oh yeah, some parts of America are
closed
still
everything
closed to accept what is there. And the beauty is there is that beautiful American regional food like the Carolinas or like the barbecue craze.
Right.
It's like, I mean, we live in Texas. I mean, you get barbecue anywhere. I tell people, and this is not in a bad way.
Damn gas station.
No, but I'm glad that some of these guys, like Mueller and Aaron Franklin and Snow and other people like Billy Durney in New York and Sam Jones and Rodney Scott. All these people are doing regional barbecue like traditionally are getting their due. You know what I mean? And because there's a lot of work and time and effort that goes into it, and it's different than, I think it's different than restaurant work, but these guys will tell me to go
it's a craft.
F myself because they're chefs just like I am too.
It's a craft. Each one is specific, and it's amazing. It's phenomenal the different flavor profiles you can get out of that.
But that's what comes out of that regionality is they're stuck on those things. And it's hard for you. I mean, you can't put an Afghani restaurant in North Carolina. I mean, maybe you could now, but
you couldn't have. No,
you could 10 years ago. You couldn't. Do that.
You just said I just saw where a guy has a huge barbecue place in New York. Is that the guy you're talking about?
Yeah, Billy Durney's a good friend of mine.
That's a big place.
Oh yeah, he's done. I mean, he was in the entertainment business. He was in personal security, and he was a big guy, bodyguard for very famous people.
He was big. I saw him. Yeah, he was.
Passion for barbecue. Started Hometown Barbecue, I think 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Blown up, doing some of the best barbecue in the country, and now diversifying. Opened Red Hook Tavern just recently, doing a fried chicken place. I think they're doing a commissary or a bigger place of hometown barbecue. So we live in this time now that it's great that our business is so saturated and so populated, but if you can step out and get people to recognize you, business people are giving you a chance. Like, I'm expanding. Because I'm making money for hotels now because, we're in a phase where a lot of these luxury hotels are in there. They need to be redone.
Right.
I mean, you're exactly 20 years of luxury is okay, but that was, 20 years ago.
That's right.
And they need food and beverage to help them. So, Knife at the Highland has really been successful. It was a blessing. I had Spoon in Preston Center there. And it was, critically acclaimed throughout the world for being a seafood restaurant in the middle of Dallas in a shopping mall. Go figure that out. As a chef, that still blows my mind. And then Behringer Harvard asked me to take over 214, but it had to be a steakhouse. So I just went at it like, I really was like, oh my God, if Leslie Brenner doesn't like me now, I'm going to open a steakhouse. She's going to kill me. You know what I mean? Because I think, people, there's a certain mentality of critics thinking that once a chef goes into a steakhouse, that they were kind of selling out. But I never understood that mentality. But
no, I don't. First of all, not here in Texas.
No.
And be careful who you call critics. Nowadays, we have so many people that want to be restaurant critics that I just.
Well, I have, Pete Wells. I don't know why he did it, but Pete Wells called me about complaining of all things. Go figure. So, and I wondered, he asked me how I handle like people who complain or, we had just opened Plano. So in the first 2
Love
weeks.
That store, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
Beautiful.
And I thank you for your support and everything you do for us because we really appreciate it. I know, and you're a great customer, so thank you.
Appreciate it.
But all of that attention in the beginning, people take advantage of you and they yelp. I mean, I had a lady that she came up to the counter with her daughter. She was a Top Chef fan. She said, "We loved you on Top Chef." She had a napkin tucked into her blouse, and she goes, "Can I take a picture with you and my daughter?" Right? And then they sat down. They were a party of 8. I think one of the steaks wasn't properly cooked. Right. And this is day 3. Literally on the way out the door after we comped the steak, I took the picture. She was so happy. We treated her like gold. On the way out the door, she's writing a 1-star Yelp review. So I had my manager call her. We apologized. We had her come back. We comped them. They spent $900 on the comp. So in the New York Times, you wrote that article, but Pete made the point in that article that those people aren't critics. They're complainers.
Right. There you go.
But he's the critic because he has the voice.
Right.
He has the New York Times behind him, and he has the education, and he takes the time to look at the culinary world as a whole, not just write about my experience at Bob's, hamburger stand in Sheboygan. 0 stars. Bob wasn't there. I didn't like the sauce on the burger. I care what people think, and that negativity sometimes can help you solve a problem in your business.
If it's warranted, though.
Yeah,
I think that some people need to step back, and if you've helped them, if you've replaced a steak and you've come, there's nothing else that needs to be done. I mean, nobody's perfect. Yeah. They're not perfect in their lives, and so the people have to understand that things happen in restaurants. Front of the house, back of the house. I mean, shit happens.
Oh yeah, and it can go sideways in a heartbeat. It's like guns and Yelp. There should be background checks. That's all. That's,
I like that.
You can have them. I'm not taking them away from you, but just like we got to know who you are first.
I'm not going to be as harsh as Bourdain's comment about you. Did you see that? Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Oh my God! I'll tell you what he said when he was on national. Oh my God! It was I fell out on the floor. I rewinded about 5 times just to watch the expression what he did. It was great. Okay, so you left Paris, came back.
Yes, and that changed my career. I became chef of that restaurant. And then, unfortunately, Alain and Pierre, they were a gay couple.
Okay.
And Pierre had a boyfriend who died of AIDS. This was This was right in that period in the 80s where AIDS was rampant. You know, and so Pierre moved to New York, and I bought the restaurant from him. I went to my dad and I said, "Can I borrow the last?" You know, I dropped out of college. And I went to culinary school.
I did too. I don't know.
So I asked my dad if I could, you know, instead of like, you know, having the money for the last 2 years of college, can I buy this restaurant? And it was $63,000. And I took a bartender, Jimmy Nelligan, who was worked at Magic's Pub, was great.
I love that name.
He was older than me. Yeah, Jimmy Nelligan at Magic's Pub. How much, you know? And he was a real bartender. You know, like now we have mixologists.
Right.
They wear uniforms, and you know.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge anybody their thing, but Jimmy was just a straight up. He knew everything about cocktails and spirits, and he would make a drink, and he was a great conversationalist. He was what you would want to go to a bar for, you know, or a pub, like a real pub back then. Because it was neighborhood, you know, and it was like, even if they were famous people or they were wealthy people or talented people, it was still a neighborhood, and people went there to talk to Jimmy.
People like to talk to the bartenders.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's just, I think that's a big part of being one successful.
Yep.
You know, being able to communicate
But
with
see,
them.
it was the best move for me and the worst move that Jim could ever make. Because we took Jim into fine dining.
Oh.
And it was like right in the turn of the American cuisine where we were all trying to be like French restaurants. Right. And I'll never forget, there were a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Goldberg, who were good customers of mine at Pierre's. And we had just turned over, I changed the restaurant into an American restaurant called Hampton Square, because it was 82.
Right.
I'm 24 years old at this time, and I'm owning my first restaurant. You know, I think I know what I'm doing. and Jimmy comes over, but this is the kind of stuff Jimmy would do. Like Mr. Goldberg would just, like, I think one day he was like snapping his fingers on a Friday night, and Jim was 6'4", played basketball for Fordham University. He grabbed Mr. Goldberg's fingers and said, "Mr. Goldberg, I will do anything you like. Just don't ever snap your fingers again at me." So, you know, Jim's temperament was more for the pub rather than the 4-star French restaurant. So, like, I bought him out eventually. I owned the restaurant for another 10 years. That's why, like, there was a point in my career where people said I was like transient. I forget what the word they used, you know, but I had a restaurant from 24 to 35 years
most
old.
of them don't.
And you know, 11 years and in the Hamptons, and it was a tremendous success. I made a lot of, I sold it for almost $250,000 from the 63 that I paid for it. You know, so like, but I had no idea what I was doing as a businessman. Right. You know, it was just, it was a great lesson, but so you can see where my life's been like a magic carpet ride. Right. So I go to New York, I go broke. I literally go broke. And I was waiting for a deal. It's a long story. And that's when I met Bourdain. You know, I was living on my friend Bob Ginsberg's floor in the Greenwich Village. And I picked up the New York Times. And I literally, it's when you could pick up the New York Times, classified it. And I found a job. It said, "Formerly Joe's looking for a chef." So I go meet Bigfoot, Andy Menschel from Kitchen, for you Bourdain fans, Kitchen Confidential. And Andy is a character. Like everything that Tony says about him in the book is true. He would literally, in a pimpish kind of way for a restaurant business, any new green person that came to New York off the bus, put them to work in that restaurant and abuse them psychologically. Like, you have no idea. Like, you must work and clean and scrub they're like an Eastern European dictator. You know, but it was a good, you know, it was a good work ethic environment to work in. But it was a strange place. So I get the job at the Supper Club after this. We did this for I did Formerly Joe's for about 18 months.
Oh, okay.
It was
That's
like
a long time.
It was like a prison sentence.
Yeah, I was going to say,
making $700 a week on the comeback.
Did you learn a lot?
I did learn a lot. You know, and the clientele was crazy. Everything from longshoremen to Wall Street people to like models. So like, you know, it was like, you know, New York at that time was just a different place. And I think people were more friendly back then. You know, there's less inhibitions.
I will agree with you that.
We blended a lot easier. I think people are afraid of people now. Yep. Or they're judgmental, or I don't know what it is.
And also too, because of social media and the internet, a lot of people can't do face to face anymore. They don't know how to talk to people.
No, they don't.
And so it's screwed.
We text to each other.
Yeah.
I even text to my, you know, family in the same house. It's ridiculous. I'm like, put the phone down and come in the room and talk to me.
They have a new commercial on TV where they're talking about dinner, and they're all texting. It's for
on the couch. Kids texting each other, sitting next to each other.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, it's true. It's ridiculous.
No one wants to look each other in the eye, you know, because then you can really find out something.
But
about
that's
somebody.
what screwed it up. Anyway, go ahead.
No. Okay, I forgot where you took me. You took me far, far away.
Well, yeah, it's been 18 months there in prison.
Yeah, at formerly Joe's
in the kitchen. Yeah.
Formerly Joe's, and we go to the supper club, and I put together this band of gypsies. So the supper club was initially owned by Jean de Noyer, who owned La Galou on Madison Avenue, which is a famous French restaurant.
Okay.
So Wayne Nish, who was a famous chef in New York, he was the chef at the Quilted Giraffe after Barry Wine became the owner.
Right.
And it was a supper club. They were doing dining and dancing in Times Square.
Oh, wow.
So it didn't really fly, and it turned into a Friday and Saturday night business. Wayne left to go on to other greatness, and Pat Williams was the chef for about 6 months, and I think she had an implosion on New Year's Eve, and she left, and I luckily got the job. So now I'm making
You said implosion.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a minute because it's in Tony's story, Nasty Bits, where he kind of like, he steals my evening, but he doesn't use my name like he didn't use my name in Kitchen Confidentials. He didn't use my name in the story, but every New Year's Eve at the supper club, they would sit 400 people at one time.
Oh, my gosh.
And the tickets were coming out of the computer like this.
My God.
And I made one fatal mistake. I had a station where I was doing a hot oyster appetizer,
right,
and the guy was also doing an entree. So when you're sitting 400 people,
right,
the cook can only do one thing at a time.
Right.
Because it's just like, I need 20 oysters.
Right.
He can't stop and put out
right.
35.
You can't.
And the seating was insane. So we were so far behind. People were walking into the kitchen. It was insanity. And at this point, they let in the nightclub crowd.
Oh, my.
Because we had a nightclub. That's what I was saying. Is like when the dinner and dancing didn't work, this lady, Raven Solomon, came in and she was doing all of these private events. So we would do like Unplugged with Bob Dylan. And I was doing Tony Braxton videos. And like, Brian Susser. Like we would do all of these things for VH1 and all these things. So I was like catering for like these rock stars. And I was sitting up on the balcony watching Bob Dylan play sound check with like 4 of my cooks, and that was it. I was friends with Blues Traveler and Dave Matthews, who wasn't a superstar at that time, and I had all the roadies and all the guys that worked with those guys up on me in the balcony watching Bob Dylan because we wanted to see
those
this.
Those are stories you don't forget, though.
Oh no, and then and with Bourdain, who's not Bourdain at this point,
yeah, right. Yeah.
And we're with Adam, last name unknown, and Steven Souchef, who are all the pretty much the basis for a large part of Kitchen Confidentials and Tony's. Step up to being a writer and, being a chef and being a writer. Because at the supper club, I went back out to the Hamptons to try to find my career again. And I was trying to do both. And I had worked for a rich doctor friend of mine, the Saxes, who are like family to me. And they introduced me to a guy named Dave Glue, who ran Epic Records. Dave introduced me to Mariah Carey and Tommy Mottola. And they were building a huge house in upstate New York. So I was cooking for Mariah Carey lunch every day at her apartment. And then working at the supper club. And then I was trying to work my way back at the Hamptons at the Inn at Quogue. Okay. So I had this thing going on where I'm going to make some money now. I'm going to get back on my feet again. Yeah. And Bourdain kind of threw me under the bus and took my job at the supper club. And then went on to...
you made that mistake?
Because I made that mistake. And then he went on to Theatro and became a chef and then started, he was already writing books.
Right.
But then he wrote Kitchen Confidential.
Right.
So that's...
People still talk about that book.
It's incredible. And, it's sad that Tony killed himself, and I don't really want to get into that because we could talk for hours about that.
I wrote an article on that. Did you see it?
I didn't, but I've read a lot of them, and I try not to read them because a lot of those articles are written from the time that he was famous,
right?
And
you know him differently.
I was listening to Tracy Morgan on Howard Stern on the way up here this morning. And he was talking about stand-up comics. And the point is, like, when you bond with people, you have to bond when you're not famous.
Right.
It's hard to bond with somebody once they become famous because there's so many other people in the equation. So Tony and I always had that bond. He went on to tremendous celebrity, a worldwide brand. His best friend was Eric Repair. Scott Bryan, who worked for me, I introduced Tony to Scott. Scott introduced Eric Repair to Tony, and the rest is history. So I've always been in that inner circle with those guys because we came from the same city.
Right.
We kind of came up the same way. Eric's a genius chef, but that's how we were just friends.
We're going to hold it right there. We're going to go back for a little commercial break because these guys like to pay bills right here. They're capitalists. They want to keep the studios open, I guess. I don't know.
It's okay.
So we're going to be about 3 minutes, 3 seconds. We'll be back. See y'all in a minute with John. Bye.
Got an old car? You can donate it, whether it's running or not, to the United Breast Cancer Foundation and save a life. They'll even come and pick it up for free. The United Breast Cancer Foundation has saved hundreds of women's lives through their free or low-cost breast screen exams. But now they need your help. The United Breast Cancer Foundation wants to save more lives through early detection by offering women free or low-cost breast screening exams. And donating your old car, SUV, or truck, whether it's running or not, helps pay for them. Plus, you get a charitable tax deduction. Help the United Breast Cancer Foundation save lives by donating your old car, SUV, or truck. Call now for free pickup. 800-245-0823. 800-245-0823. 800-245-0823. Call right now. That number again is 800-245-0823.
It looks like you're losing.
I am.
Are you losing weight?
I am losing. I've lost about 10 pounds.
How are you doing it?
Funny name, but I've done it with Riduzone. RIDUzone.com, and the stuff works. It's, you get into all that, the molecule this and the found in that. All I can tell you is it makes you feel full, and it keeps your mind off of wanting to overeat.
And also boosts your metabolism, so you're burning more.
Yeah,
Try it today. It's going to work for you like it's worked for Brad and countless other people. Riduzone.com. RIDUzone.com.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
And we are back again with John Tesar for another 30 minutes. Is it Tesar or Tesar?
Here in Texas, it's Tesar.
Tesar.
Tesar. Johnny Tesar here. No,
I've heard people produce it out 4 different ways, so that's why I was
it's Tesar.
Tesar. Okay.
Tesar.
Okay, that's good. All right.
Like tea, cup of tea in the Russian Tsar, but it's a Czech name from Tesar, which means woodworker. So that is an adaptation. So my adopted parents were Czech, and
that's
the Americanization they just turned it to. I guess it was Tesar, but I pronounce it Tesar.
Did you ever go back to Czechoslovakia when you were a kid with them? You ever travel over there?
Never.
Okay.
I mean, my grandparents spoke Czech, and my parents did, but it was never. I mean, my mother would go to Prague every once in a while, I think later on in life, but I just haven't. I've wanted to go there because I hear it's like Paris and it's beautiful, but I haven't had the time.
Yeah, it's a trip. Okay, so we left off. You're in New York. You
were at the Supper Club.
You were at Supper Club
with Bourdain.
So
I go back to Bourdain. Takes my job at the Supper Club. I'm at the Inniquag.
Okay,
and the Inniquag, we reinvented. We turned it into I have been lucky that people are interested in me as a chef and come see my food. So we brought a lot of people that used to go to Hampton Square back to the Inniquag, but it was a very volatile situation. The owner was a little flaky, and the money wasn't there. It was a seasonal business.
Boy,
so I did it for 2 summers, and then I opened a restaurant in New York City called 13 Barrow Street with 2 of the my friend E.J. Masisko, his brother Michael was on Wall Street, and another friend, John Hawthorne, his brother was a bond trader at the time, Billy Hawthorne. They put up all the money for this restaurant in Manhattan.
Bonds.
I saved $10,000 that summer, and I actually secured the lease.
Oh wow!
So I went to New York City.
13 Barrow.
Got a real estate agent, right? And I signed the lease with the only $10,000 I had for a restaurant for 10 years in New York City.
That wasn't in there yet.
That wasn't even there yet. Yeah. And then I went out and found 2 buddies of mine to put up the money, and we did it for I think $400,000, which is a lot of money, but to build a restaurant these days, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And it was an overnight sensation.
That's awesome.
And we ran it for 4.5 years, and it really, that's what got me into food television. I was doing the Food Network, and all the celebrity chefs were eating in our restaurant. It was a 50-seat restaurant. So that kind of changed my life. But then when it ended, it also changed my life again, because I had to reinvent myself yet again, and that was hard back then.
It was hard. It was different back then. It was hard for you, but I'm going to keep telling you this, it's your passion that makes you through all that. A lot of people would have quit. I mean, It just happens. But nowadays, too, I think that restaurants have to evolve and change. I think 5 years, and you have to make some kind of change in a restaurant. What do you re-spruce it up, full menu, something? You had 5 years, I think, is the longevity.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Trey. And it's also, they even make equipment like that now. Like stoves would last forever, but kitchen equipment, 4 or 5 years. So if you're a restaurant owner or you're thinking of owning a restaurant, you better have the money saved, because every 4 to 5 years you have to kind of refurbish the whole thing, and also take a serious look at your menu. I mean, I do that every day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, even though we are perceived as a steakhouse, you know, we do a lot of other things.
Oh, yeah, you do.
And I try to keep that seasonal and keep it moving forward, and you know, all that kind of stuff. It's a full-time job. You know, it's a day-to-day grind. I mean, chefs,
minute by minute, hour by hour, week by week.
You don't get a day off.
No, you don't.
You get time away. You get time away from the kitchen, but you don't get a day off.
No, you don't. You can't. Hey, so you left 13 bars closed down, and then you
13 Barrow Street closed down, and then we sold it to these guys who hired me to do it for about 3 or 4 months. Big mistake.
Oh God!
The first time I ever walked out of a job in my entire life. You know, it was too much. I couldn't go home. You know, like, it was my restaurant. I started it. I created it, and then we had to sell it, and then I had to go work for some other guys, and it just wasn't working out for me psychologically. And then I got a job in the Flatiron District. I ran this place called Hush. And then I made this move to Wall Street. It was a restaurant called Vine. And it was right across from the Stock Exchange, 25 Exchange.
Oh, wow.
It's a Bobby Vans now, I think. And that was the low part of my career, because it was the time in New York, we just switched food critics. Bill Grimes became the food critic.
Right.
And he was bashing everybody, like Charlie Palmer, all these famous French restaurants I was talking about earlier. He was trying to move the scene into a younger, more progressive scene. And when he came to review Vine, he gave us 1 star, which I had never, ever gotten before. And he said, John Tesar's good, but in a very easy listening, middle of the road sort of way. Was this? I can still remember this. And this is, I guess, almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
So I laid on the couch for 3 days feeling sorry for myself. Had a huge fight with the owners.
You know you can't read those comments, John.
Back then, I didn't know any better. And it was the New York Times.
Yeah.
And the next night, I had to do Chefs and Champagne with the James Beard Foundation in the Hamptons. And I was right next to Bobby Flay, Rocco DiSpirito, and Alfred Portali. And everybody in the room had read my 1-star New York Times review. I had a great dish that night, but it wasn't exactly the best night of my life.
Right.
You know, like, I'm like wondering why people.
Did anybody rib you on it that night?
No, it was one of those things that people just don't. They stop talking to you.
You know, you stopped talking.
It was one of those moments. It's like, it wasn't even. It was that bad that, you know, like, it's different in some places because people will rib you.
Yeah.
But in New York, when people stop talking to you,
that's it.
It's time to look around and maybe make some moves.
Make some changes.
Because some bad stuff's about to happen.
Yeah. That's pretty funny.
So, you know, I've had.
It's not funny, but it's funny. You know,
it's funny now.
Yeah, it's funny now. Yeah, it would have been funny back then.
Back then, it wasn't very funny.
No, I've been plenty of those in my life. Trust me.
Yeah, but those are their inspirational moments.
That's right.
Because I had to really dig down deep and go to work. You know, and luckily I went for a long ride on my bicycle, and I went to the West Side. You know, because we had done I was living on Wall Street at the time, and they had gentrified the river, so you could ride your bike all the way up to, you know, the 95th Street or something. So I for some reason, I got off right there at the Intrepid by Times Square, and I rode my bicycle up to 10th Avenue. I was going to put some air in the tires at that Hess station, because everybody that's been to New York, that Hess station's been on 10th Avenue and 44th Street forever. And I saw this place like being built, and it was on the corner of 44 and 10th Avenue. And I'm looking in the window, and a guy comes up to me and goes, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm just looking. I'm curious. He goes, "I'm opening my restaurant." He's really proud. This guy named Scott. He introduced himself. He said, "I'm Scott." I said, "I'm John." He goes, "What do you do?" I said, "I'm a chef." And he goes, "Really?" He goes, "Wow." So we start talking, right? He goes, "I've already hired a chef, but I'm not really sure how experienced she is. Would you come over to my boyfriend and my apartment and cook for us? Because we think we might have to make some moves." And this girl was Rebecca, her name, right? So I go to Scott's house, and I just throw some food together. And they're like, "You got to come be the chef of my restaurant." So I'm going like, oh my God. But we're starting in controversy again. Now I'm like pushing Rebecca out of her job. And I said, "Why don't you make us co-chefs, right? Like we can we'll share the responsibilities." So, and Rebecca was cool with it. So we did that for a year, and
it worked. Then that's fine.
Yeah, and she stayed. She basically turned into my sous chef, which was okay because she really didn't have the experience,
right?
And it wasn't fair. So we just kind of really worked peacefully together, and we turned this place 44 and 10 Hell's Kitchen into an overnight success. You know, and I was kind of reinventing my career. We started doing like 12 brunches on a Sunday, and I think to this day, I drove by there a couple of months ago. They're still doing 300-400 brunches on a Sunday.
Wow!
I mean, it's a neighborhood restaurant.
Yeah,
but we did better than average.
So
food.
It's still there.
It's still there.
That's awesome.
Years later, it's still there, and we had done better than average food. Right. You know, I was sautéing fresh seafood to order. I was bringing all of this French and bringing it more simply to the plate.
Right.
American bistro, kind of what's happening now.
Right.
We did it back then, making it more affordable, but the quality, not sacrificing quality for affordability.
Right.
And then 9/11 happened.
Oh boy.
And I had lived across the street. You know, I was living down there on Wall Street.
I had friends down there too. Yeah.
It was terrible. You know, I don't want to go through it all again. You know, I still get goosebumps.
Yeah.
Saw the second plane hit the building. Anyway, so, you know, I'd always I was a snowboarder.
Right.
As I got older, I got into snowboarding, you know, from surfing as a natural transition. And I said to myself one day, I said, this is not a good time to be in New York. You know, I'd had to move uptown. I sublet an apartment on Central Park West, a little studio for an actor that had gone on a road tour. And I was riding my bike every day to go in 44 and 10. And I thought there was much more in my life for me. Like, this was great for now, but this was only what was next.
Sure.
And I'd been going to Squaw Valley in Tahoe for years.
I love Squaw Valley.
Every Christmas.
Yeah.
So I said, how come I've never been I think one morning I woke up and said, how come I've never been the chef of a resort? You know, everybody loves my food, all this stuff. So I went to Squaw. You know, I would always tell my staff I'm going to see my brother and sister-in-law who lived in Vegas.
Right.
So I'd go there Christmas Eve, spend Christmas with my brother and sister-in-law, and then for 4 days I'd jump on a Southwest plane and sneak up to Tahoe, fly to Reno for $59, rent a car, go up Mount Rose Highway and snowboard it at Squaw.
Yeah.
So I get off the chairlift one day and I said, how do you get a job in Squaw Valley? And some guy goes, they're building this huge project in Truckee. He goes, why don't you call them, right? So I call, and this guy, Clark Wolf, answers the phone. Actually, this lady answers the phone and said, you need to talk to our consultant, Clark Wolf. And I knew Clark from New York. He's a famous consultant. He's been in the restaurant business for years and years and years. He lives in San Francisco now. And he goes, wow. Boom. So there was a connection. I had a foot in the door. So they flew me to San Francisco. I went to the Fairmont Hotel, did a cook-off with this other guy, Dale, and I won the cook-off. They gave me the job. It was my first corporate job.
Right.
They paid for my move. They paid me to move.
John was on the dole.
I was on. So I buy a Ford pickup truck.
Oh boy,
City boy.
Yeah,
City boy buys a Ford pickup truck.
That's your first pickup?
My first pickup. Drove all the way to Tahoe, the long way through the south. I went, I just wanted to see things that I hadn't seen before. Went through New Mexico and then back up into Nevada. And then I worked there for 3 years. It was epic. I did and these are the same people, East West Partners. They did all of Vail.
Awesome.
So their deal is they come in and they lease the lakefront restaurant. We fixed North Star Village. Much later on, they sell a piece of land to the Ritz, and the Ritz builds a Ritz-Carlton there. And then they lease 3 golf courses, and then they sell the timeshares to Marriott. But then they sell the surrounding homes. So these 5 guys, they come into a community, they borrow $200 million, and they walk out of there making like $2 billion. Yeah. But I got to be the chef of all this for almost 3 years, which gave me credibility in the corporate world.
Sure.
So from that.
But all this time, when you were doing all that, every time you went somewhere else to do something, you gained more experience about the culture in that area, the region of the food, and so everything that you did like that gave you experience of stuff from that area.
Yeah, I was able to not live in a bubble,
right?
And I also had some struggle during the real. Most chefs really make their bones like in their 30s to their 50s. Right. And from my 30s to my late 40s, I wasn't a journeyman, but I was just trying to find where I was going to live and who I was
trying to find you.
I was really trying to find me and what the perfect fit was. And I still tell people all the time, the life of a chef can change instantaneously. And the restaurant business is so fickle, that you do have to protect your talent and your reputation. And that's hard to do at times when you're moving around.
Yes, it is.
Because people ask you why you move, and I still, to this day, when I look at someone's resume and I look at them, and they can't stay someplace more than 3 months. I'm
What's
like,
wrong with this guy?
And I understand young people want to move and learn and stuff like that too, but I need more stability from a cook.
Yeah.
So from that, luckily, I was burning out in Tahoe because I was snowboarding 110 days a year. You
were literally just tired.
Yeah, I'm living in California. Pot's legal. But except it wasn't legal back then.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, this is great, but there's more to my life.
Right.
And I'm living in this 3 split level condo with a view of the lake. I'm like, I could stay here. I could live here forever.
But you weren't happy. You were trying to find.
There's something in my soul as a chef that I need to be in I need to be in the mix.
You need something more.
Yeah. So a fishmonger, Chris Lazicki, who worked for this company down east, calls me and said, Rick Moonen is looking for a chef. He got a deal in Las Vegas. So I fly from Tahoe to Vegas. I meet Rick at Charlie Palmer's Steakhouse in Mandalay Bay. Rick and his partner love me. And the only thing Rick says to me, he goes, you got the job. You have to be in New York 4 days from now. So I give my dog to my neighbor in Tahoe. I have the condo in Tahoe. I'm keeping the thing. I'm just, Rick was going to pay me a decent amount of money. I probably wouldn't keep it forever.
Yeah.
I looked up a sublet in the Village Voice. It was a woman who rented an apartment on 12th Street, and it was the East Village between 2nd and 3rd. So I hired a guy that I knew. I took everything out of the apartment, put it in storage. I hired a guy to strip the floors and paint the apartment. I rented a Ford, went to IKEA, outfitted the apartment all in 48 hours, went to lunch on Monday at RMC Food in New York, got in the program. And what was happening at the time is that Rick's 2 chefs at RMC Food in New York were leaving. Anthony Amoroso went to work for Michael Mina at the Bellagio, and Matt Accarino, who's now the owner and chef of SBQR in San Francisco, was going to work at Per Se because the Time Warner building was just coming and Thomas Keller was just opening there.
Is this when Vegas is starting to make transition into more entertainment, more of the big restaurants?
Yeah, this is when Vegas was on its second incarnation.
Okay.
There was the original, when the Bellagio was built,
right.
There were a lot of New York chefs they brought out there. And Grant McPherson ran it, but they had, and Julian Serrano, everything that is still there now, basically. Yeah. But so that was the start of the second wave of Vegas. So Mandalay Bay was doing the same thing. They had Chotero, who had all these restaurants in New York, China Grill, and there were like 100 venues. Right. And, ironically, Bruno, who's the chef of Bouillon now, who replaced me at the Mansion, was the chef of Mix at Mandalay Bay at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So that's what happened. I wound up working in New York. Rick and I fought like cats and dogs in this period of time, but his partners figured a way to get me to go to Vegas. So I was working 4 days in New York, 3 days in Vegas, and then I flip-flopped. I was living McCarran Airport to JFK. Okay. Not sleeping, and I had my little pied-à-terre on 12th Street, and I had the condo in Tahoe. At this point. So my life's turned upside down, but I'm back in the mix, and Rick just gets 3 stars from the New York Times.
You're right.
My career, this was like an infusion. It was like a B12 shot.
That's right.
And I had no idea what I was doing because I stepped into like one of the busiest, like most popular restaurants in New York, and these 2 young chefs were kicking some butt, man. So I learned, and we were running this thing like the French Laundry. There was a pass, and there were squeeze bottles and eyedroppers, and I'm like, the haze of Tahoe's like wearing off me. Right? So, but it was the greatest gift of my life because Rick's this tremendous celebrity chef in New York. It's a 3-star restaurant. I'm working with the 2 of the brightest young talents in America who prove themselves later on because they're on their own now. So I get injected back into this world, and it reinvents my career one more time. And now we closed. Unfortunately, Rick had to close New York a year into this because of the rent. It was a Rick problem, not a John Tesar problem. Yeah. But then I'm in Vegas, and I'm the chef of Vegas at this point. And Rick and now we're buddy. We worked out our issues. Because when you work for a celebrity chef and you have a kind of reputation yourself, it's a little difficult at times because there's friction, and we had 2 different styles of cooking. And there has to be a lot of trust.
You think Eagles ever enter into that at all?
I think so. And Rick was at a really vulnerable point in his life because he was losing the restaurant in New York, and that'll mess with your head really hard.
Always.
Yeah, and I was really trying to be respectful. Yeah. But it was hard because I was garnering attention. So and that's rough. And Rick's going through a rough time, but he has all this opportunity, and here I come with all this energy and passion. But he needed that. Yeah. So we fit, and we're still great friends to this day. But I did that for about 3 years, and it was great because my family lived there, so I got to be near my brother and my sister-in-law. And the only bad part is I bought a house at the top of the boom, and I bought a house for $348,000. And I thought I was a baller. I got the job at the mansion. I'll show you how that happened. But I wound up short selling this house for $121,000. And
I had one of those.
I learned about the housing market.
Yeah, my dad told me not to build a new subdivision, and I was building my first house. I was built a really big house. My dad said, "Don't build that house; it's not going to do what." Well, I lost my ass. Yeah,
I was lucky that everybody lost their butts.
Yeah,
and I short sold it. It affected my credit, but I'm actually for all those out there. You can fix your credit.
You can.
I looked at my credit report is 740. I was like, looked at it the other day. I was like, damn, success is. It not only helps you it helps you in all types of ways. Paying your bills.
You can correct anything in America. You just got to work at it.
Paying bills on time really helps. It's amazing. Maybe this restaurant business might pay off after all. After 40 years of doing it, but I still live day to day in this business.
You have to. Okay, so you came to Texas.
Yeah, a headhunter called me and said, would you want to replace Dean Faring?
I remember that.
And I was like, I put my hand over the phone for a minute. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I also knew that this was also the highest paying chef job outside of owning your own restaurant. Because Dean was a legend.
Right.
I mean, 27 years, the godfather of Southwestern cuisine. And we didn't know that he was moving on to the Ritz. I was like, I didn't even ask. Like, where's Dean going? I was like, he's leaving?
He said he was on a plane with you. He was here, did my show, and he said he was on a plane with you going to Pebble Beach.
Yeah, we travel a lot together. Yeah. Dean and I have really become close friends. We had dinner in Pebble Beach. I owe my career here in Texas to Dean. Dean laid the groundwork to it.
That's what he said.
And he's made it possible for all of us. There's not anybody.
He said he laid the groundwork for all the chefs of today's time.
He really did. And he's still a baller. He's still an icon. He'll always be an icon. He's a very famous chef, and wherever he goes in the country, he's beloved. You see it. I go to all these festivals too that Dean's been going to for years, and he's admired. So you're replacing Dean Faring. It's this huge salary. You're working for Rosewood. And it's amazing how I get this job because there's a lot of people hunting for this job. They didn't call just John Tesar for this job.
And John Tesar got it.
Yeah, I did get it. I did. And I'll tell you how I got it. It's bizarre. Everyone thought Mrs. Hunt owned the mansion at that time, but I think the mansion had financial difficulties. And Meritz Wolf had kind of come in and bought a portion of the mansion.
Okay. For cash infusion, maybe?
Yeah, and they were floating the mansion at the time. So they had a large say. They really had the say in what was going on. But you still had to go through the Hunt family, meet Mrs. Hunt and the whole 9 yards. Sure. And then you had to go through Rosewood HR, corporate. It was a big... Yeah. I'd never been through such a deal like that because when I went to work for Rick, even though we were in Mandalay Bay in a hotel, it was before MGM Grand bought the hotel, and Rick had a lease. So Rick was my HR. I had never been in this huge corporate conglomerate kind of thing. So I got passed down the line, but it came down to Bob Ballone, the CEO of Rosewood at the time. He's no longer with us, and so unfortunately he passed away. I go to his house to cook, and his daughter was, I think, 5 or 6, and she's a wild child. Amazing kid. We're still friends to this day. And I got stuck cooking with her all day long. So I cook, and John Scott, who's the head of Rosewood, comes over, and I'm doing dinner for all these people. And Bob's daughter sits on my lap and falls asleep at the table. The next morning, Bob calls me and goes, "You got the job." So I was like, I became family overnight, because and that was because Dean was family, and that's what they were used to, and it happened naturally. They didn't want some fancy pants chef rolling in there that was going to replace Dean.
In a lot of respects, you and Dean have a lot of characteristics that are the same as far as passion and the way you approach people and what you do in the kitchen with your staff and stuff. So you two have a lot of that same perspective on life.
And Dean's much more affable than I am. Dean loves to work a room. He's just charming. Yeah,
in our show, he makes sure he gets him and goes to every table. He works, like a ballerina would just turn around,
And I tease him all the time. I said, you could serve burnt toast to somebody, right? And then 2 seconds later, you're at their table and they fall in love with you. He's the most charming guy in the world. He's a great chef too.
Yeah.
So he laid all that down for me, and the mansion was a great probably the best opportunity until recently in my life, because it reinvented my career. It allowed me to be an individual. And then Bob and Rosewood let me do the renovation. And it was a different time than now. We were still doing fine dining, but I was able to do that chef's room and bring the 5 stars back and get the mobile stars back and really have people in Dallas embrace and who I was as a chef, and also get to know me personally, because when you're at the mansion, you got to walk that room.
Right.
Like I think one of the first nights at the mansion, I'm cooking dinner for Jerry Jones, Alan White. I mean, T. Boone Pickens is at another table.
Rich Pickens.
Yeah. And the who's who of Dallas, it was just crazy. And the Hunt family's over here. It was just, legendary. You hear about Texas.
Right.
So the first night I'm cooking for everybody you've ever heard in Texas.
Yeah. All the stories.
Next week, President Bush is coming through the hallway and Dick Cheney's staying in the hotel. It's a surreal experience to be the chef of the mansion on Turtle Creek, especially back in that time.
Yeah.
So it was the greatest opportunity. But then I had issues. We were working with Bob. We were going to sell the mansion for flip. And these guys from the Arab Emirates were going to buy it. And they offered Flip, I think, like $60 million or something like that. Flip didn't want, he wanted more. He wanted 80 or something like that. And they turned the deal. And then September 29th came around.
Woo!
The world crashed. Yeah. Flip went back and those guys were gone. And the hotel went through extreme cuts. I mean, even to this day, I love that place and I will never begrudge that experience. But the mansion got hit hard, culturally, because people aren't into fine dining.
Right.
Economically, it was sold to a Chinese company. So it kind of lost its focus, I think.
Right.
It's, and that's kind of sad for us. When I'd sit with Dean and Bruno and myself and even Avner Samuels and Wolfgang Puck every once in a while, I'll get to talk to him about it. Yeah. We're all sad because the mansion really was a large part of Dallas, but Dallas is changing. Yeah, and that's a sign of the changes in Dallas. The bar, it's always going to be an institution, but they're just not giving it the same love and attention that it used to have. But it was one of the greatest opportunities in my life, for sure.
So now let's talk about Knife in a second time. Let's talk about Knife. Mm-hmm. Knife Steakhouse, Knife Burger.
Yeah.
You're in Dallas. Now you're in Plano. You got Knife Burger. You got the butcher shop in Plano.
We're so lucky. Behringer Harvard gave me Knife. People have embraced it for over 5 years now.
I love it, by the way.
Knock wood. We dry age meat. It was a whole process. We have a book. If you don't know about us now, come check us out. Google us. I'm sorry. I'm not that guy. And we were lucky. Starwood just gave us a ton of money, and they're our partner. And we opened this butcher shop, Knife Burger, and a Knife out in Plano at the Willow Bend Mall. Please check that out if you're out there up north, because you don't have to drive in the toll road, and we're serving the same. Actually, I think the menu out there is a little larger and a little looser.
And
because
you have brunch out there.
Because I'm not in a hotel, and we do have brunch and lunch 7 days a week. Right. So. And it's a beautiful restaurant, so check it out.
You have Knife Burger in Fort Worth and the new Crockett Food Hall.
7th and Crockett. I have to tell you, Fort Worth is an amazing town for steak and hamburgers. They really have embraced Knife Burger and been so kind to us. And there's a big difference between Fort Worth and Dallas, and I love them both. But it's the people in Fort Worth have just gone bonkers over our burgers. So thank you guys for all of that. I really appreciate
everybody
it.
Has.
Yeah.
Won my top award.
We're lucky. Thank you. No, thank you very much. It's all about It's all, that's why we call it the Ozerski. It was Josh's.
That's right. Yeah.
It was Josh's perfect hamburger. Yeah. And it's proven itself because people love it.
Yep. And you're opening up Laguna Beach in Orlando.
Yeah. From the success of Knife, we've been so lucky. This is what I was saying earlier. The hotels, a lot of these hotels need gentrification. And they're using food and beverage to invigorate and keep people, and retention, keeping people on property. Right. So through the success of Knife with the management company, I got a deal in Laguna Beach at the Marriott Cliffs Resort. Right. We're going to be opening Outer Reef, which is a reinvention of Spoon. Right. And that'll be open in late September. It's coastal seafood from Baja to Seattle. We're going to be on the West Coast. I'll have some East Coast seafood, but it doesn't make so much sense to fly it all the way across the country when I have the ocean right there in front of me.
Right from you.
So we're not going to do exactly what we did at Spoon. I'm going to have to focus it on the West Coast, and that's what I'm very involved in right now. And lucky enough, a good friend of mine, Mark Stone, who had worked with Morimoto for years, and took Morimoto out and got him all these restaurants that he has now, came to me a while back and asked me if I wanted to open a restaurant in Hawaii. And I was like, wow, Hawaii. I said, yeah. And that deal, it's still in the pipe, but it's not moving too quickly. And there's an owner's wife who doesn't want to do all the things that everybody else wants to do. So that could happen or couldn't. And if I do it, I'll do it with Sheldon from Top Chef because he lives in Hawaii. So time goes by. I think this thing was like, I went to Hawaii. It was great. The deal's not going to happen. He calls me like 3 months later and goes, you want to move Knife to a Ritz-Carlton in Orlando, Florida? And there was another one, again, I put my hand over the phone because I don't want to be too anxious. I count to 5 and I go, yeah, that sounds interesting, So
Orlando.
Yeah, we work out the deal. These hotel deals take a long time to work out because you got to go through owners, you got to go through management companies, and when you're dealing with Ritz and JW Marriott, you got to go through so many layers. But we fast-tracked this one because the one in Laguna has taken almost 2 years to get on track. The one in Plano, it's Starwood Equities, but it's still like dealing with a hotel group or a hedge fund, So that took almost 2 years to get done. But Orlando is going to be open in January, and Laguna is going to be open in September. So I have a few months to do it, and that's going to be a Knife. It's called Knife and Spoon. We're putting both concepts together. That's the Ritz-Carlton Grand Lake Resort in Orlando, Florida.
Hey, catch us next week, y'all. Trey Night Live on Friday. Thank you.